it can be friggin' lonely to be a founder. I'm sure there are people listening that just feel like they've got like 19 problems and they're the only one that cares about them. And it does not have to be that way. Frankly, it cannot be that way because that's not a sustainable model. So that is one of the huge benefits of investing in building a team.
Hey, Nate, we're approaching the end of season 1 of our podcast here, this grand experiment. And there is a topic that's been on my mind that I really want to do an episode on. And I wanted to fit this in right before we kind of finish up here in a week or two. And it just has to do with how BMF scaled over the last 12 years. It would be impossible for you to run a school, even with a co-owner that's equally responsible, without having some heavy duty support people. And we've talked about your marketing team, and we've talked about, admin and directors of communication and et cetera. But we have not talked about a very crucial role in your school yet. And that is the department heads. And once again, I've had people reach out and ask, hey, what did Nate mean when he said that? So I'm going to stop talking here. Could you jump in and just start telling us about the department head role at Brooklyn Music Factory?
Absolutely. And let's just put it in very simple terms at first before we get into the specifics of each role and the responsibility, which is that as a small business grows from, say, 3 or 4 or 5 people, including the founder, once you start passing the line of 10, it was taught to me that once you get over 12 humans on the job that are all trying to collaborate and work. It doesn't matter if they're contractors, it doesn't matter if they're remote, it doesn't matter if they're on-site, it doesn't matter if they're a teacher versus the front desk person. Once you get over this magic number of 12, you have to start reorganizing. And what I mean by reorganizing is that if a communication becomes much less efficient, right? It becomes hard for everyone to just listen in and all know what you're doing as a school. So you begin to put in sort of that, like, this is where the term manager comes in, or in what we're talking about today, a department head or a department director, that's what we call it. And so now teachers have someone other than the founder that they can look to ask questions, share concerns, get guidance, etc. So at Brooklyn Music Factory, we really never thought too much about directors. It was just my partner who was the band director, and I was the private lesson director, and basically that was the whole company. We had private lesson students, we had band students. Pierre was responsible for all of those customers. I was responsible for all of these customers. And then as we grew, for example, we added a camp, which started serving 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 students a year. And so Pira moved over to camp director, which left a void. Right? And the reason behind all of this, so if you're listening, you're like, wait, I need to hire directors for all my departments tomorrow. You first ask yourself, how big is your program? How many employees do you have? How many people are trying to collaborate on something at once?
Well, that was going to be my first question. At what point did you hire that first director? How many students did you have? What was the size of the school, et cetera, et cetera?
I have such clear memories of this because it required me giving up my private lesson director position, and it required my partner, Pira, giving up her band director position. So we did that when we were at about 18 to 20 employees, including administrative support, our bookkeeper, et cetera. And so when I think my partner first moved on from band director. And so that was probably 5 years into the business.
Did you measure this more in number of employees, not number of students? Because I asked it in a certain way, but you answered it differently.
Totally measured it in number of employees.
Interesting. Why?
Because of that, what I was first sort of insinuating, which is that as you grow the number of employees, chaos can reign. Right? Every teacher can just start doing it their own way, or you lose connections with the families, because as teachers start taking on more and more families and your program grows a little bit, then as a director, one of your key responsibilities is that you're there to set vision, to set clear goals for the department, but also to be available when things don't go according to plan. So if a parent needs to talk to someone and it's not working to talk to the teacher, they go to the director. So yeah, I measured it in number of employees because you're essentially trying to organize a whole group of people to head towards a specific point in the future together. You're all trying to row at roughly the same cadence in the same direction.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what are the department head roles that BMF currently has? Can you just list those off?
that's a great question. So we're smaller than we were in 2019 as a company right now in terms of number of employees. So we have fewer directors. We have a private lesson director. We have a camp director. We have a director of families and communication. That's sort of what you'd consider administrative director. So that's my wife, Jessica. For example, she leads the marketing and sales meeting. She's always at the all staff meeting representing as sort of like the logistical operational head. And then we have me, and I'm basically defined as sort of a CEO. So basically you have camp director, you have private lesson director, you have let's just say director of administration, because that's a simpler term. And they all essentially report to me. I mean,
who did you have back in 2019 that you don't have now?
Yeah, great question. We do not currently have a band director because that was one of the programs we shrunk in anticipation of our grand opening that's happening this fall. So we will be bringing on a band director in the fall. In 2019, we actually split the band director role out by age range. We decided that we wanted a director for ages 4 through 8, and then we wanted an ages 9 to 17 director in the group class program, because it's such a different part of those musicians' journeys. And the skill set necessary to manage a parent who has a 5-year-old versus a parent who has a 15-year-old is quite different, right? You're communicating something very different to those parents because those parents are at a very different chapter in parenting.
Yeah. Well, what else? Were there any other roles that you had in 2019 that you don't have now?
Yeah. So one of the things we've experimented with over the years is we experimented with specific instrument department heads. Okay. So like the drum department head, guitar, bass head, voice department head, piano. We actually found that to be too much.
Okay.
Yeah. So instead, what we have is sort of what we call now department representatives. So basically, it's much less responsibility managerially, right? In other words, they're not running a voice department meeting every month. Instead, what they're doing is just being very mindful of the curriculum and the methods being used to help our voice students get through the songwriting journey from one songwriting party to the next. So it's less responsibility.
Did you, and I could be off base here, did you have a marketing director and now you don't?
Yes, so we did in 2019, and I have taken on that.
I see. Okay.
So over the last couple of years, I've acted as a marketing director. I absolutely have an SEO person and I have a Google Ads person who report to me, and those are contractors. Those are not they're not on site. They're remote workers now. Remote employees rather. But in terms of setting the marketing vision, that became folded into my role as CEO.
Okay. So I'd love for this episode to be equally helpful to someone who's aspiring to this, but also equally helpful to someone who already has a larger school. And, maybe they already have experience doing this, and, but there's value in learning what others are doing. I'm running a business of a certain size, but I mastermind with other people who have similar businesses or similar size, and I get great ideas from them all the time. Oh, yeah. I can't believe I didn't think of that. What for the school owner that already has a fairly sizable studio or maybe has some department heads? What is a hack or a tip that you would give to them to say, hey, here's how you can level up something that you already have in place?
Great question. Let's say you have a school that's 250 to 350 students. You're not directing all traffic. You have another director. Let's say you have a private lesson director or you have a group class, like let's say you're rocking, Daniel, your group piano class. And so there's that might be 80 students in your school. So you need help there. A really simple hack. Well, I'm going to give 2 simple steps you can take right now. Number 1, make sure that there's a clear meeting rhythm that person is in charge of. Number 2, make sure that the 2 of you define what the agenda is going to be and what success is going to be defined as from that meeting. Number 3, make sure that director, sorry, I'm giving 3, make sure that director has a clear monthly check-in with you where they give their definition of what's worked and what hasn't. At BMF, we have what we call a big 3. I'm literally reading, I'll read you Ben's, who's our private lesson director. His big 3 has 3 categories: communication, which says, am I ensuring that all private lesson faculty are communicating consistently with families? Second one, he has, resources. Am I setting goals, prioritizing, and allocating resources for all private lesson departments? When we say resources, we mean like unique Brooklyn Music Factory teaching method resources.
Yep.
Dig it?
Music games, all that. Yeah.
All that stuff. Finally, community, because that's central to our whole mission and purpose. He just says, am I creating opportunities for students and faculty to come together and celebrate accomplishments? Am I retaining faculty? Right. So he's got these very specific community. They sound large and abstract, but no, every month I can ask him, what are you doing to bring faculty and families together to celebrate their accomplishments? And so, we talked about in a previous episode, this idea of the musician's journey reports. That is a classic example of Ben's communication measure of success and community measure of success. And resources. It's a trifecta. So yeah, those are just simple things. And if you have questions like, wait, what are the agendas, Nate, that you guys do at BMF? Just reach out.
Yeah.
Ping us, just email and be like, hey, I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah. So many of the episodes in this first season, at least a third came from people hearing something one of us said offhand and said, hey, could you go into that more? The episode we had a couple of weeks ago about Musician's Journey Report was a perfect example of that. Of someone who reached out, had a particular question about something you said offhand, and it came from that. So Nate, it sounds like the first 2 department head roles that were created were for private lesson and band, and you and your co-founder retained those. You handed those off. Maybe you already said it once in the episode. What was the next one that was created?
Yeah. So an important. So my partner Pira moved from band director to camp director.
That's right. You already said that. My fault.
But what's interesting, I mean, it's a great question because we need to understand that in the essence of a director role is ownership over the vision for the department and how it measures success, both in terms of, the student success, but also how it the financial success for the company. Right. So this is important because a director position, all of a sudden now you're in sort of like the quote C-suite.
Yes.
Like you're thinking about the overall health of Brooklyn Music Factory when you're in that director position. I talk, Ben's our private lesson director, right? Ben sits in on meetings that are about the annual priorities of the company. And those annual priorities of the company include enrollment targets, they include financial targets, they include profitability targets. He's sitting in on those. He's linking his success within his department to those larger goals as a small business, as a company, right? So that's one of the clear differentiators. And when you ask, well, what was the next director position you created? Well, we did a camp one because camp became a priority for Brooklyn Music Factory. So oftentimes, Daniel, we get questions from people: should I do a summer camp? Maybe I should institute a group lesson program, group piano class program. I mean, I've heard you talk about it. It sounds good. Look, those are not small questions, right? Those are visionary questions. When you say, hey, I think I might want to adopt, or I want to build a group piano class, or I want to build a summer camp, what you want to actually be asking is, am I in it for the long haul? Is this going to become a pillar of the company? In other words, camp has grown to become as much as 33% of our gross revenue.
Yeah.
So of course there's going to be a director position. And my business partner, she's a founder, yet she also has a big three. There is very clear definitions of success. She has very clear sales targets. She has very clear metrics that she tries to meet as a director of that program. In addition, she runs an amazing camp where students have an incredible experience and write original songs every day of the week.
Yeah.
Right. So it's clear when we talk about a director position, it's not just to take work off your back as a founder. It's because you as a founder have set a clear vision for this program that you want to become a pillar of your company.
Okay. So that's an entire episode right there. Let's not get into that.
Okay.
Not that you were implying you were going there.
No,
I think the interesting question then would be, how do you identify someone in your school to step up and take this role?
Okay, I love that question. I want to tell a little story. One of our former directors, Jason, I think we talked about him in an early episode for the season, when we talked about how to increase enrollment quickly. Anyways, Jason was our band director for years, became a really close friend. We stay in touch. We just had lunch and we went on a long walk together about a week ago. Now, on that walk, I was like, hey, dude, I'm about to hire a new band director. We're about to start the search, right? And we're going to bring someone on to direct the department. And I'm wondering if you could summarize, in hindsight, what are the most important responsibilities for you as a band director, right? What do you remember being essential? Like if you were to strip away everything else, this is the thing that you had to bring to the table to succeed as a band director. And so I'm going to read you, because I literally just wrote it in my Evernote after he shared it. And I was like, dude, I got to write this down because it's just money in the bank.
I love this. This is great.
Yeah. He said, first of all, you are the parent curriculum communicator. We can hashtag that sucker, the parent curriculum communicator and troubleshooter when there are parent issues, right? When the parent needs someone other than the teacher or an administrator to talk to, you're the person. Secondly, you're real-time support for the teacher in the classroom, right? He said you can't take for granted that a teacher is going to come in and know classroom management out of the gate. Sure, sometimes you're going to hire a classroom teacher that's going to have great management skills, et cetera. But he's like, that was one of the first things that he realized as director. And he was a mentor. He went in to classrooms all the time to support other teachers who had issues. They had a student that they just didn't know how to redirect in a positive way, right? So you're either helping with management issues, or you're helping with curriculum issues for the teachers. Secondly, you're essentially the monthly teacher training for the stages of development in that program. So in his case, he's like, in the band program, you had a 4-year-old who came into mini keys. Then they graduated as a 6-year-old to jam band. Then they graduated as a 8-year-old into a rock, write, and record program. As the director, you're the one who clearly defines for the teachers what it looks like for a mini key to finish year 1, year 2, jam band 101 or to year 1 and year 2. You have to just constantly hammer that message. This is where your students will be in a year. Where your students will be in 2 years. And then the third and final thing is like, honestly, it's just accountability. You're constantly reminding the teachers of the mile markers.
Wow.
This is where you're going to be in 6 months. This is where you're going to be in 3 months, 1 month. Here we are. How'd you do? So that's it. That's the entire Evernote.
So this might feel a little bit off topic, but in the greater context of what you're talking about here, something's really occurring to me. I often hear and this is more true of school owners who are kind of at the beginning of their journey, or they haven't really grown the school to a large size yet. Well, why would a teacher want to work for me? Why wouldn't they just go out and teach on their own? In hearing what you just said about Jason, or what his comments were, how could Jason do that alone? This actually betrays um, a perspective change that needs to happen in that school owner so that they actually can grow to a large size. It betrays the idea that, oh, I think I'm just delivering lessons, I'm delivering instruction. No, what Jason's getting in that role is something he can never get alone, which is in leading that department, he's actually leading a team of people who have a vision for how a whole group of kids are going to going to progress in their musical journey, and he has support and team around him to do things so that he can focus solely on a few really critical roles in the school versus the solopreneur teacher, the by themselves teacher that has to handle all those roles themselves. And I think the perspective that needs to change if someone wants to grow is that if you give someone a limited number of tasks and roles to fulfill, they're going to have so much more focus and drive and energy to execute on those things. It's very clear that Jason really owned that role, and from the sounds of it, did a really good job at it. But he could never have done that on his own. He needed all those people around him.
Yeah, and it's really wise, and I think the hesitancy that I hear, or we hear often in owners that have smaller programs, is the idea that if I bring someone on, number one, I'll have to invest resources, and I'm nervous about investing dollars into someone. And number two, I'm nervous that it's just going to make even more work for me because now I have to manage a director, right?
Yeah.
And so you're highlighting this essential point, which there's got to be a mindset shift. If you want to grow your school, and you want to grow your school into a sustainable model, right? You don't want to just grow rapidly and then be freaking out working 70-hour weeks, right? You want to grow into a model that is energizing and sustainable for you. Then you're going to have to make that shift, that you're not going to do it alone. You are going to bring on some others. And when you bring on those others, the two of you, let's say you bring on just one other director. Let's say you bring on a private lesson director. You're going to just act as CEO founder, and you're going to bring on a private lesson director. The two of you are going to invest a solid year into discovering how to define as clearly as Jason and I did what that director role is going to look like for your program, right? So when Jason said things like clear mile markers of where they needed to be, let's just put that into real terms. We had band parties twice a year. A lot of our listeners have band parties, right? Those are the mile markers. But it's that Jason would define, okay, we're 6 months away from the band party. This is what you should be doing in your program. We're 3 months away from the band party. How are you doing? Then when you get to the band party, he's there equally invested in all. In the case of BMF, we'd have like 28 bands playing over the course of a day. You know, he's equally invested in all the bands and whether or not they realize the vision of the program versus the teacher who's invested in her 4 bands.
Right.
That's the key mindset shift. So as you as a founder are ready to bring on a director, you're bringing on someone who you're saying, hey, I believe you could be as equally invested as I am in every student in your department. You know, and so, yeah, there's no way, like, Jason's can't do it alone. He needed me. He needed my partner. He needed the teachers. The whole idea of growth comes from building a team, right? It's just like, so yeah, they need them, but you as a founder also need to be like, wait, I'm ready to actually invest in a director, and I'm ready to let go of me being the only person who feels like they believe in this thing we're building.
Interesting. I think I only have one more question, and then perhaps you have some additional thoughts that you wanted to share before we sign off here. I think my last question, and I'll set this up with a little bit of a story. When I'm going to reference something I actually said in a previous episode. when I brought on my very first really key employee, within 6 months, I could directly attribute tens of thousands of dollars of additional, not revenue, but profit as a result of bringing that person on. And the long-term effect of that was, I mean, on the back of one or two key hires I made, I doubled what was already a multi-six-figure business. That's a good ROI on a really key hire. I'm curious, what do you see as the ROI of these department head roles? Was this what brought, BMF to be nearly a $2 million school pre-pandemic? On the backs of these people, on the talent and the drive and the camaraderie and the collaboration. I'm sure there are other things, but what do you see as the ROI of these roles?
Yeah. So the first one is exactly what you're looking at right now in your example at Grow, which is that if you as a founder have a clear direction and a place you want to get to, whether it be a gross revenue or an enrollment target, those are very closely linked usually, or a retention target of students, then yeah, that's the first ROI that you're going to put at the top of the, you're going to just say that. I'm going to start building a team of directors, and the return on that investment is going to be that these directors and myself, we work as a team to reach, $1 million in gross revenue, or whatever your target is, $500,000 in revenue. Okay. I would say that is actually the most straightforward ROI. You invest up front, it costs you now, but you have a lasting return on that. Okay. I would say, though, that there's a more nuanced ROI that I have felt. Okay? And that is that when you bring on directors, it forces you to get hyper clear about a couple things.
Yes.
Yeah. Number one, it forces you to get clear about exactly what you're going to offer at your school. It's like, not I'm going to offer everything, so I'm just going to get a director of everything. You're like, I'm offering a group class program for ages 4 to 8, and I'm bringing on a director to grow that program. So number one, it gives you hyper clarity on what is your product suite? What is it that you're actually going to promise, and how are you going to deliver on that promise? The second thing is that it just forces you as a founder to be so clear and so consistent in your messaging as to the why behind your school. Because you're never going to get investment from a director if you're like, what do you think, dude? What do you think we do, and why do we do it? Do you think we should be a rock school, or do you think we should be like a group classical piano program?
It always comes back to this, 100%.
It totally does, dude. But the thing is, Daniel, is I have I'm for sure going to communicate with at least 2 directors today, just in Slack. And I'm always going to cite some aspect of our purpose in that communication. Hey, Greg, he's like our content director. Greg, man, I'm loving what you're doing with this new game. Dude, it's so badass that you're focused on the rhythm fluency, because I think we need more rhythm games to help develop our fluency first approach. That'll be my Slack to him. But notice, it's totally like a purpose-focused, hammering the message of a fluency-first, game-based approach. Meanwhile, I'm just saying, dude, you're doing an awesome job. I love what you're creating. Keep doing what you're doing. So I feel like when you start to build your team, it actually gets you to work much harder on your role as a founder and as a messenger. And as someone who points very clearly to where you're going every year.
Yeah. Yes. I think the only thing I would add on to that is that there are these little wake-up call moments you have as you expand your team, where now you actually have a person who can or a group of people that can double, triple, quadruple your output because it's their output now. And one thing that I found over the years, and I don't know if we want to file this under the category of a hack or whatever, or a lesson learned, or, hey kids, this is a warning. This is a warning, is that things I thought for years, oh, once I have the help, I'm going to totally do that.
Yes.
And then I got the help, and then I did it, and I realized I shouldn't have been doing that. And now I'm actually paying someone to do something that shouldn't be done. And I think this goes right to your comment about it forces you to get more clear, more purposeful, but actually it doesn't by default.
Yes.
You will either learn the hard way or you will be clear. And I think this is a place, and Nate, I want to turn it over to you before we end here, if you have anything additional to say, but this is where I want to say that I was looking at all the things we could have talked about. We make, Nate and I make these big shared documents of all the things we possibly could talk about. We didn't even get into deeper things around identifying the kinds of people, how you hire those people, how you interview those people, what they do from day to day, how as a school owner you coach them in that role, the legal ramifications of having them in your school, what their responsibility, like we scratch the surface here. And once again, I just want to say that Nate and I have taken a small group of school owners and have created a place where we actually are going into the depths of these things. And if this sounds like something that would be incredibly valuable to you, I think you should just reach out to us and we can tell you a little bit more about that. It's not something that we've trumpeted up to this point, but I think it's something that as we get more and more questions where people are saying, well, what about this? What about that? This is important to you. Just reach out. And we're happy to talk a little bit more about that. But Nate, any other thoughts before we go?
Two. One is I loved your last comment there, that I've experienced this. I've discovered that, well, actually, we didn't need to do those 6 things.
Right.
We only needed to do those 3 things as director. And in fact, when I had that conversation with Jason, it was because I didn't want to make a mistake in the hiring process.
Yeah.
I wanted to hire only the essential role. And I also wanted to hire someone that I could bring in. Maybe I don't need someone full time. Maybe that person can do exactly that job, but 20 hours a week, 10 hours, right? So is there an opportunity to help my budget a little bit if I just am much more intentional about hiring the next band director, right? And also, not adding work on there that's unnecessary. Nobody wants to do unnecessary. Nobody wants to be busy for the sake of being busy, The last point I'll make is this, is that it can be friggin' lonely to be a founder. I'm sure there are people listening that just feel like they've got like 19 problems and they're the only one that cares about them. And it does not have to be that way. Frankly, it cannot be that way because that's not a sustainable model. So that is one of the huge benefits of investing in building a team.
Yep.
Because you're no longer trying to solve every puzzle together. Notice how Jason said, he said the director is someone who can talk to the parent when the teacher and the administrators are not enough. Well, guess who it usually falls on? The founder, the school owner. Like if something goes off the rails, who's the last line of defense? It's us, right? It doesn't have to be. There are people, if you do this right, who will care as deeply as you do about their department. So that's the last thing I'll say is that, at Brooklyn Music Factory, we're in a rebuilding of the team phase right now. We're literally hiring. We're going to have hired like 7 new employees by the fall because we have this amazing new space opening in Brooklyn, right? I am well aware of the investment for the next year in those new employees into creating the depth of community and culture and camaraderie. But I'm also well aware of the value of that for me personally. of just how much value I'll get out of showing up there on a Friday afternoon and hanging out in the community room with this amazing group of directors and teachers and the desk people and all. That is just so good for me, because I don't want to be doing this alone. I don't want to be out there just on my own, feeling like I'm putting out every fire and I'm the last line of defense.